Andy Farrell has rung the changes, but the team to play Japan still has a very familiar core. My name's Mark. Let's talk rugby. When Andy Farrell announced his squad for this window, we knew that there weren't, a ton of new faces in there, but I think the team, or 23, picked to play Japan kind of really lays that bare for us to see. It's not exciting reading for anyone looking, towards the next World Cup in terms of Ireland bringing through younger, fresher players and really kind of, mixing things up with that in mind. And when we have a look at it, you're going to see exactly what I mean. So let's have a look at it. So the Ireland team then to face Japan. Starting the forward, so front row, got Andrew Porter, hookers Kelleher, then we got Clarkson on tight head. Second row, James Ryan and Ty Byrne. So Byrne, if you hadn't heard, his red card was rescinded. I think pretty much everyone was expecting that to happen. I haven't heard anyone who thought it was actually worthy of a red card. So no shock there really, and the fact that we'd only played 3 minutes in that game, he was definitely starting this game if available. Then the back row, then we got Ryan Baird, Caelan Doris as the captain, and Nick Timoney at 7. In the backs, Craig Casey and Jack Crowley as the halfback, so all Munster pairing there. Then the centres, you got Robbie Henshaw and Tom Farrell making his debut. Only the second debutant of this November series, and only the second possible one as well. There was only one initially, that was Paddy McCarthy from the initial squad, and Tom Farrell was drafted in. Then the back three, then we got Jacob Stockdale, Jamie Osborne and Tommy O'Brien as the back three. So it's a decent Ireland team, but again, you're looking at those players, and we'll look at the bench as well before I actually expand too much. But looking at those, you're not seeing a ton of new faces there, compared to past years. Then on the bench, we have Gus McCarthy, Paddy McCarthy, Finlay Bealham, front row replacements. Then we got Keane Prendergast covering second row and obviously back row if needed. Then we got Jack Conan covering back row, Caelan Blade at 9, Sam Prendergast at 10, and then Jimmy O'Brien as your utility back cover there. Okay, so yeah, just looking at that 23 there, and think back to the 2023 World Cup, how many of these players were not kind of somewhere in and around the squad? Not that many. So we're not seeing, sometimes people talk about evolution versus revolution. I don't think we're even seeing an evolution of this Ireland team at the moment. Seeing the players picked here, and there are 3 players were ruled out for injury from this. So that was Gary Ringrose, then McCluskey as well, so those 2 in the centre, and then Tom Ahern. And for me, of the players in the forwards, at least in this squad, Tom Ahern was probably the guy I was most excited to see getting a start beside Ryan or Byrne or whoever, and just seeing how he went, in an Irish pack, kind of similar to this. If he was in this game instead of maybe Ryan, I would have been hugely excited about at least seeing him. With him not there, guys I'm looking forward to seeing really Gus McCarthy off the bench. Paddy McCarthy hopefully getting more minutes off the bench this time. And then, it's nice to see Casey and Crowley together. Tom Farrell definitely at 13, but like he's 32 making his debut. So he's not exactly, a young guy coming in, and bringing, I'm sure he's going to bring new energy because, he's going to be on debut, but, you need, well, at least I feel you need more kind of young guys coming in and bringing that kind of enthusiasm of youth into the squad and having that kind of natural turnover. And it feels like, we've got too much of a logjam now with players, and it's leading to players who are, older in the system making debuts. The likes of, Tommy O'Brien, very excited for him on the wing, but at the same time, he's no spring chicken either. And we don't have, if you look at, the All Blacks had a bunch of players that weren't that familiar to us up the north, like, coming into their setup against us. And we know about all the quality South Africans running around. We don't need to, like, if you watch any type of URC, like that there is 3 or 4 squads full of talent and plenty of young guys there as well for them. But for us, we and I don't know whether it's, you look at this and you think we don't have the players, but then you look at the players who perform, at URC level and think, well, maybe we're not as bad in terms of that as you might think, because, Izuchuku, unfortunately, injured, wasn't available for the squad. He would have been, I think, definitely somebody who would have been in there and brought that kind of energy that we're looking for. Then you've got, people like Sheridan at Ulster as well, like, very athletic second rower there, similar to Tom Ahern in the second row, bringing that kind of stuff as well. And, you've got young Ben Murphy at Connacht at 9. You've got Harry Byrne. He's obviously no spring chicken himself either. He's been in the Leinster system a long time, but you have him at Leinster potentially to come in and, provide some of that. Then you've got the likes of, O'Donoghue, Gavin Coombs, that gets overlooked all the time. You got Gleeson, Ruan Quinn. You've got a ton of back rowers at Munster as well, who for one reason or another can't get near the squad either. So for me, there are definitely players there, but we're not bringing them in. And, that's kind of, for me, is a little bit disappointing, but it's the way we've gone. We're obviously not going to change tact in the Six Nations. So the whole thing about this was, this is for ranking for the World Cup. We want to stay in the top 6 and as high as we can in the top 6 by the end of November, so that we get a good draw for the World Cup. And then we're going to be into the Six Nations, and we're not going to be suddenly experimenting in the Six Nations either. So then you're looking at the summer tour, but then the summer tour, you're thinking, well, would it be maybe a good time to give some of the more senior players time off, because they had the Lions this year as well, and maybe bring players through then. So, but then you're putting a lot on that summer tour, I feel, in terms of getting players through the system. But that's where we are now. So let's talk a little bit deeper about the team that we have here. So front row, Porter, Kelleher, we know what they can do. Clarkson still finding his feet at test level. We want to see the Irish scrum being more consistent, I think, in terms of being a solid set piece for us. Doesn't have to be dominant, but certainly being solid and not being under pressure the way we were against New Zealand. And, I'm happy to see someone like Clarkson getting more game time under his belt, because, I feel like, Furlong and Bealham have had to do it, a lot by themselves. Obviously, in terms of front rowers, we did have O'Toole and is it O'Sullivan at Ulster as well, who came in and looked like they were decent, and it didn't really go anywhere for them in terms of long-term involvement in the squad. It seemed to be Furlong, Bealham, and then one other to kind of just fill out the squad a lot of the time. So seeing Clarkson in there is good, but again, I'd like to see just more competition in terms of, you would imagine that for, this type of squad, that we would have had just a little bit more in terms of maybe, but I suppose you have to think, can you leave like a Bealham or something like that out of the squad and bring somebody else in, is the thing as well. You don't want to ruffle the feathers. But, that's the position we put ourselves in, I think, by picking players so much. But that's our front row, starting front row. Should be enough to handle, against Japan. But at the same time, you don't want to see them just surviving in a game like that. You want to see that front row actually in this game being dominant, to just show you that maybe against stronger scrums they're going to get a bit more parity. Obviously, Kelleher, generally in terms of scrummaging and line out, is a better option, I think, than Sheehan. Sheehan has improved his core game, as it were, over the last year or so, but I still think Kelleher is a better option there. So hoping the line out certainly goes better. And with Ryan and Byrne in there, and Byrne obviously being the line out caller, I'm sure him getting red carded after a couple of minutes had a big effect on our line out as well. But at the same time, you would expect the team to have to pick up those pieces and perform better than they did in the line out. But, you've got Ryan in there, real workhorse in the second row, Byrne a big threat at the breakdown, and good options in the line as well. Then the back row, then Nick Bird is good option in the line again. You've got his ability in terms of just athleticism, getting around the park, being a threat out in the wide channels as well, and the fact that he's gotten better at kind of hitting rucks and those kind of things as well. Doris, I think, is going to be massive just in terms of giving us that go forward, that we didn't get against New Zealand. We saw it when he come on as well, for a short time there, in the first half. I think he come on maybe as an HIA replacement, for a little while, and he really looked to have impact. Not as much impact when he come on officially, as it were, in the second half, but we really were missing like a really good ball carrier. But we need to get more in our pack as well. We can't just be relying on one guy to do it. Then we've got Nick Timoney there. He's decent threat again at the breakdown, so himself and Byrne together, and then when Porter's on it, he can be a third threat there too. So I think it's a decent balance in the back row there. But you have to think, in terms of Nick Timoney, how many more chances is he going to get? So hopefully he has a really good game in this and proves himself to be a real option there in the back row, and not just someone who's filling a shirt because they want to rest players for Australia or wherever. Although I don't think any of the players really should be resting, given how, we're talking about Leinster players, certainly, given how little game time they've played. And it's interesting that Furlong, is rested for this game, because he, of the Lions, he was the only, I think, possibly the only one that played against the Sharks the week before that Munster game. So he did have an extra game in his legs compared to the others. Then into the backs, then Casey Crowley, really nice combination. I'm glad Crowley is staying at 10, and I feel like, Prendergast has to win that shirt back rather than be given the shirt back, which is obviously the worry for a lot of Irish fans, is that's something that might happen. Casey, it's good to have him there at 10 to show we have another option, because Gibson Park, he's a fantastic player at 9, really good in terms of his distribution and the speed of ball, etc. But Casey has that little bit more dog about him, and when it's battle the way it was, against New Zealand in terms of the breakdown, the contact area, I feel like Casey can give you a little bit more. He gets under people's skin, and he G's up his own pack, I think, more than Gibson Park does. So I'm kind of happy to see him in there. I'd like to see as well him getting some game time alongside Prendergast, but it might be that they bring on Blade and Prendergast at the same time rather than give him any time with Casey, and we might actually see we probably will see Blade maybe coming on before Prendergast comes on for Crowley. And then obviously if there's injuries, Prendergast mightn't even come on at 10. We might have to reshuffle. So we'll have to see how that goes. Centres then, Henshaw and Farrell. Interesting combination there. I think, Farrell has been really, for me, one of the form players in Ireland. And even though he is 32, making his debut, I'm glad that his form has been rewarded, because it feels like for the last 3 or 4 years, form hasn't really played much part in players, being put forward for selection for Ireland. That, somebody had to be playing absolutely out of this world, to be able to get a call up. And then still they probably sitting behind the player who's been there for a number of years, and you can, you can't really knock Andy Farrell in terms of that he's going with the players that he's most used to, because I think anyone in the same position would probably do the same, right? A player, he's had maybe 50, 60 caps, while you've been there, or for the bulk of the time you've been there, and delivered almost every time for you. You're not gonna say, okay, well, I'm taking you out for this new guy who's now going to be in your position and you have to win it back. So, but still, it's good to just to see some new faces in there, and I'm interested to see how Henshaw and Farrell go as a pairing there in the midfield as well. I feel like Farrell is definitely going to make some breaks, some half breaks and some breaks. He's got a nice offloading game, and it's going to be about, can we get the players to go in support of him to actually take advantage of that as well? How will, like, maybe Henshaw run off more, the wings, coming into play as well, Osborne coming from full back, etc. And then obviously some of the ball playing forwards as well, the likes of Bird, trying to get there to support him, because otherwise, what's going to happen is he's going to get isolated. We're either then going to have a slow ruck, or we're going to get the ball turned over with a possible penalty for holding on. So yeah, how that dynamic goes is going to be interesting. Then the back three, Stockdale has been in really good form this season. Last season, he was back to a bit of form last season as well, but he had that kind of thing where, you know, it's happened to him, unfortunately, too often with the injuries and stuff, where he was, you know, have a few good games and then be injured for a while, back, get up to speed, another, you know, string of good performances, and then injured again. Whereas this season, fingers crossed, things have been going well for him, and he's one of those players that's almost like almost a forgotten talent for Ireland. Because remember, like, you know, back when he burst through, his, like, the November and the Six Nations, the first time he got into the Ireland team, he was absolutely sensational. You know, top try scorer in the Six Nations, and then after that, nothing really much happened for him in an Ireland shirt. Kind of in and out of the team, and not really kind of living up to the potential that was there. And, you know, I'm hoping that he's going to be around for a while now and be a proper option there at wing as well. Then on the other wing, Tommy O'Brien, thought he had a decent debut against New Zealand. Really good in the air, himself and Osborne, and, you know, decent defensively. But we need to see more from Ireland in attack. We didn't see anything really against New Zealand attack wise. You know, I don't think we made any clean breaks at all against New Zealand. So we've got to be able to do it against Japan. And, you know, looking at the personnel there, there's certainly, like, you know, you look at it, like, Casey definitely able to snipe. Crowley likes to have a go, you know, now and then as well. Henshaw maybe doesn't do it as much as he used to when he came into the Ireland team first. Farrell absolutely on fire. Stockdale, you know, he loves to have a go. We know that. Sometimes he likes his chip over the top a little bit too much. But if it works out and he scores a try, you can't complain about it. Osborne loves to, you know, come into the line from full back, and Tommy O'Brien has proper pace that a lot of the Irish backs don't have. So in terms of personnel, it's there, but, you know, in terms of our attacking structure, can we actually take advantage of those is the question. Then onto the bench then. So got Gus McCarthy coming on at hooker. You know, seen him a lot for Leinster. I like him, but at the same time, you know, you're looking at that, and you're thinking, we've got like 3 Leinster hookers in our squad, and, you know, you wonder, like, it just in terms of, the first thing I'd be thinking is, well, if he is considered number 3 for Ireland, then, and I know Leinster want to bring him through because Kelleher and Sheehan are kind of the same age profile, etc. But you got to be thinking that, you know, he should probably be even loaned out to one of the other provinces, so that not only is he, like, he does get decent games at Leinster, just because Kelleher and Sheehan are limited in the number of games they're allowed to play, but it means that when the big games come around, it's Sheehan starting, Kelleher on the bench, and Gus McCarthy is nowhere near. So he's getting plenty of game time, but not necessarily experience in terms of, you know, playing big Champions Cup games, etc. So yeah, one question would be, could he go to another province on loan maybe? And, you know, if apparently he is Ireland's 3rd hooker, then he should be a starting hooker for somebody else. For me, that would make sense, but I don't know on that front. And Paddy McCarthy, kind of similar as well. You know, you got Porter, you got McCarthy, and then we got Jack Boyle, who, you know, you have to think now. Paddy McCarthy was on the bench against New Zealand. Are we going to see Jack Boyle at all now this November? probably yes will be the answer, but it may be because of injury rather than selection. But we'll have to see. We might see him against Australia maybe. But again, it's 3 Leinster front rowers. And yes, they might be the 3 best in their position. But then you have to again look at the way we're structured and think, well, surely one of McCarthy or Boyle should be, if not moved to, at least loaned to one of the other provinces, because then they can be playing week in, week out and be as a starting, loose head as well, and just get that extra bit of experience. But we're not seeing it at the minute. But 2 players definitely want to see getting decent game time off the bench, because we know what Porter and Kelleher can do. Then we got Bealham. We know what Bealham can do. So I'd be happy to see him kind of sat on the bench until maybe the last 15 minutes of the game and just give Clarkson as much time as you can there. Then we got Keane Prendergast. Someone who's been in and around Ireland squads a lot, but he hasn't really had a run at it. He's kind of gotten cap here, cap there. So definitely want to see him getting on for decent game time. Maybe like we've seen other teams bring on their replacement forwards, or at least a bunch of their replacement forwards around about the 45-minute mark. I'd like to see that happening with him as well, so that he is getting a decent run. And then Conan, another guy, we know what he can do. Thinking about who's probably going to come off, you would think, given how little game time Doris has in his legs, they might be tempted to bring him off, or Baird. I hope that it's not Nick Timoney who has to make way. I want to see Nick Timoney getting 80 minutes out of the game. But Conan can definitely give you something off the bench there. Then got Caelan Blade at 9. Again, it's kind of, this one is a tough one, because I want to see Casey getting lots of time. But if Blade is genuinely our number 3 at 9, then I want to see him getting game time as well, because again, unless there are injuries, it's probably going to be Gibson Park starting, Casey on the bench for the other 2 games in November as well. And then maybe come the Six Nations, Blade may have been overtaken by someone like Ben Murphy, who's playing at Connacht as well. So that would, I want to see him getting more game time. And for a few of the players here, this feels like their only chance to get it, because, having lost the New Zealand game, now the thing is, I'm almost certain the thinking is, we have to win against Japan. And then we have to win one of the other 2 games, at least one of the other 2 games as well, which, I mean, you're not going to see, you're basically going to see almost the team that played New Zealand back against Australia, and probably against South Africa as well, with the difference being, the likes of Doris will probably be, ready will be starting in those compared to the New Zealand game, but it's going to be pretty much along those lines, I think. Then we got Sam Prendergast there, covering 10, and it's kind of, for Sam Prendergast, it's a difficult one, because it feels like he was just given the reins a little bit too early at Ireland, and then I'm sure it's not the case that he was kind of just left to it and abandoned a little bit, in terms of just supporting him and getting him through this tough phase. But it's just difficult for him now, because Crowley is obviously now the first choice, not just in obviously first choice in that he's getting picked first, but I think there, last year you may have had a debate between the 2 in terms of being at a similar level, but I think Crowley has gone to another level now, and Prendergast has regressed. So he's clearly the number 2 at this stage. And it's about handling that and also the fact that, because there is that lingering thing there of competition, that any mistake he's going to make when he comes off the bench in this game is going to be amplified as well. But you're still going to have those that any good thing he does gets amplified too. So I think it's difficult for him. I feel for him a little bit. I want to see him getting minutes off the bench. And again, he probably won't see too many minutes in the other games. In the rest of I don't know whether he's going to get a start or not at this stage. He may possibly get a start against Australia. Don't think you would start him against South Africa, certainly. So yeah, it's kind of interesting with him, I think. And then we've got Jimmy O'Brien, who, he's a decent utility back. And for me, he's kind of similar to Kieran Frawley, where, if he's in your squad, he would more than likely be where he is now at 23. He's not really for me at least, he's not really a starting option when you've got everybody to pick from, for a couple of reasons. One, because he does have that versatility to cover a number of positions, which is great to have on the bench in the 23 slot. And the other is that I feel like there are better options. He can cover a lot of positions, but there are better options just in terms of players who are more likely, to get starts in terms of just building combinations for the future. So, if he was to start in this game, if you're looking at the players that might have maybe made way from, it could have been Farrell at 13. We don't want to see that. We want to see Farrell starting. It could have been possibly Tommy O'Brien. We want to see more of Tommy O'Brien, and then it could have been Osborne at fullback as well. But we want to see more of Osborne, because when Keenan comes back, we want those two to be properly in competition for that 15 jersey, rather than it being a case of, well, Osborne covered a couple of tests, and then Jimmy O'Brien was back there, and when it's that kind of chopping and changing, it really has that feeling of just keeping the shirt warm for Keenan when he comes back. So yeah, I think overall, given the squad that was picked for the November internationals, bar really Tom Ahern, who again is injured and not available, and possibly McCluskey at 12, again injured and unavailable. You're not, there's no one else really you could put in to, as kind of not even new faces, but just faces who don't either start or appear in 23s regularly for really big games. So, it's as good as maybe we could have hoped for. And, I obviously think it's a team that can beat Japan, but again, it's more looking at the longer kind of term thing, building up to the next World Cup. Still, I have doubts about how much, it's going to progress us in terms of that, in terms of when we get to a quarter, well, hopefully we get to a quarter final in the next World Cup. Cause I was there, this jersey here, training jersey from 2007. I remember that World Cup when we didn't, we lost to both France and, Argentina in the pool, and Georgia gave us the shock of our lives as well, going into that. So, but in terms of the next World Cup, if we did get to a quarter final, and sure as clockwork, Doris is injured, Ryan or Byrne are injured, Furlong is out, Gibson Park is down, that kind of thing. There's no Keenan there, or whatever. Have we done the proper preparation to have players who can just slot in the way that your South Africans do it, the way even a team like England do it, New Zealand, etc., where you're not putting a player on and the commentary team were saying, well, this is the first time that so-and-so has played against New Zealand or whoever it may be, and it not working out well for us. That's my worry in terms of what we're doing. But in terms of this game, I think it's a decent side, and I think it is going to be one that, will be enough for, I think, ultimately a comfortable win. I think there will be uncomfortable periods for Ireland during that game, which may not be a terrible thing, because I want to see this team challenge and have them actually find the answers for themselves on the pitch, and not always be relying on the coaches to fix things at half time for them. So yeah, I think it should be a team that can win, and win again fairly comfortably. Not as comfortably as South Africa did, but still fairly comfortably against, what I would say is, a Japan team who are not at the zenith that they were, let's say, back in 2019. I think they're a bit down from that. But let me know what you think down in the comments.